worth asking ourselves three questions. First, what explains the rise of AAP? Second, what's the likely impact of AAP in national politics likely to be? And third, what are the limitations of the AAP phenomenon? Now, at a very broad level, the rise of the Aam Aadmi Party, not just in Delhi but across the country, reflects a growing dissatisfaction with or disaffection with politics as usual. There was a tendency among some people within the AAP, if you look at the prehistory of AAP, the Anna Hazare movement and so on, to confuse this dissatisfaction with politics as it exists today with politics in general. So you saw in the during the Lokpal agitation, for example, a lot of anti-political sentiment, and I think Arvind Kejriwal and the section of the Lokpal agitation that he represented saw that this approach is highly limiting and is unlikely to generate any kind of change, because if there is dissatisfaction with politics as it exists today, then the task is to change that. The task is to come up with a political alternative, a political solution, a new kind of politics. At one level, if you look at things statistically, the moment was pregnant for this kind of change. If you look at the performance of the two largest national parties, the Congress and the BJP, their share of the national vote, let's say in Lok Sabha elections, has been falling steadily. And in the last two elections has come below 50%. So more than half the electorate in this country at the national level is consciously voting for parties that are not Congress or BJP. Now contrast this with something that Pranab Mukherjee, who is the President of India and who is the face of politics as it exists today in India. And the speech he made on Republic Day, when he made a number of statements that many people consider controversial, but the one that was fairly controversial or quite controversial was when he said that there's an election coming up, people should vote for a stable government, which everybody saw as a veiled reference to an exhortation by him to vote for one or the other of the big national parties to ensure that these guys get a majority of their own. In the absence of this, you will have governments which are held hostage by opportunist political formations. The implication being that the big parties, the BJP and the Congress, are wonderful, holy, sacred, clean, non-opportunistic parties. Those that ally with them are the ones who are being opportunist. Whereas one could easily have looked at it the other way around. That today, if you look at the UPA, is Mayawati and Mulayam being opportunist by supporting it from the outside and getting something in return? Or is the Congress party being opportunist in taking their support and giving them something in exchange? Was Biju Janata Dal or TDP being opportunist in allying with the NDA when Vajpayee was PM? Or was the BJP being opportunist in seeking their support at a price that they knew was going to be something very, very high? So, when you have a president who doesn't get it and who, despite the growing public disaffection, is speaking in terms of cementing or strengthening the role of the establishment parties, it's hardly surprising that the AAP phenomenon is striking a chord not just in Delhi but across the country. People are saying we are sick and tired of politics the way it is. We're sick and tired of the domination of national politics by the BJP and Congress. Now, of course, there is also frustration with the smaller parties because at the state level, many of the smaller parties operate in much the same manner as the Congress and the BJP do at the national level. So they represent at the state level the face of politics as usual. But broadly speaking, if you were to look at AAP as a national political phenomenon, they are tapping into this growing resentment against the attempts by the Congress and the BJP to say we are the only game in town. Now, it's not just a question of political parties though. because this frustration with politics as usual also reflects a growing dissatisfaction or disaffection with the fact that politicians and politics are becoming increasingly distant from ordinary citizens, even in terms of the kind of resources necessary, the assets that you need in order to contest an election at the Lok Sabha level or at the state level. We now have 2 decades of data on the assets of politicians aspiring to elected office. And you can see very clearly that politics is increasingly the preserve of rich people, rich men in particular. And not only is it the preserve of rich men, but these rich men, when they get elected, somehow after 5 years, despite having no other source of income, their assets also increase at an alarming rate. So it's disaffection with politics as usual. It's disaffection with the fact that the kind of people entering politics are more and more remote from the day-to-day concerns of ordinary people, and the fact that these guys are able to use the system in order to accumulate wealth. And the reason they're able to do this is because government is rife with opportunities for what economists call rent-seeking. If you look at the manner in which resources are handed around, whether it's spectrum, whether it's coal, whether it's land, resources that ought to have some kind of rational pricing system attached to them, invariably are handed out to favored parties, to favored companies at throwaway prices. And I think the manner in which some of these scams have gotten exposed over the last 5 years has underlined in a way that no textbook of radical economics could do to middle class, working class, ordinary people, the nexus between the market economy, the way it runs in India, in a sort of unregulated Wild West fashion, the role of the bureaucrat, oftentimes the role of the judiciary, that rubber stamps many of these things, but also the role of the politician who occupies that position of power, passes laws, and takes various decisions. So the frustration with politics as usual is not just frustration with BJP and Congress as parties, but for the entire system that they represent. And I think this is a very, very important point to recognize, that when people are gravitating around AAP in Delhi or in other cities, they're not doing so just to go for a third front the way we understood it in the past. Like, what was the third front? VP Singh, Chandrasekhar. These guys, their USP was that we are neither Congress nor BJP. They didn't stand for any positive agenda. There was no coherent set of policies that you could identify and say, okay, this is what the third front represents. Please do not confuse AAP with that third front, because people are flocking to AAP precisely because of the promise or the promise it holds out for a new kind of political and economic system. Now, this is not a system that you can characterize neatly as left or right. And many of us in the media, many political analysts get very frustrated when they listen to Kejriwal, Yogendra Yadav and say, don't call us left, don't call us right. So it's radical in terms of simply, it's nevertheless a radical party because it represents a desire to put in place systems that don't exist, to put in place transparency which does not exist, to put in place a system of governance that does not exist, but which is meant to exist on paper. So for that reason, it's very hard to say. I mean, so they stand for, Kejriwal, for example, says we're not against businesses. We're not against the market system. But the market system has to exist, has to operate on the basis of certain transparent rules. So if you like, an easy way to think of AAP, at one level at least, is to say that these are guys who are saying that we will implement the letter and spirit of the Constitution, letter and spirit of many of the laws and regulations that we have, in a way that neither the BJP or the Congress has ever done. What impact is AAP going to have? Well, I think AAP is likely to be quite a formidable political force in those constituencies in the country, and there are about 150 to 200, where the Congress and the BJP have a straight fight. These are typically tend to be urban, semi-urban seats, and there are about 200 of these seats that are urban or semi-urban, of which the BJP or Congress won 150 in the last election. I would say in these 150 seats, the Aam Aadmi Party is likely to put up a fairly strong fight. If Delhi is any indication, Delhi, the contours of this election seem to be that of there being a strong anti-Congress wave. Prior to the entry of AAP, the strong anti-Congress wave was likely to be harvested by the BJP, which was seen, or by parties allied to it, because they were seen as parties most likely to defeat the Congress. So not necessarily out of any support for what the BJP or its allied parties represent, but simply that we are sick and tired of the Congress party. I heard recently of a public meeting in Bangalore, South Bangalore, where Nandan Nilekani met with prospective electors. He wants to stand from South Bangalore on a Congress ticket. And what I heard about that meeting from a friend who was there was that there were about 100 or 200 people who said, we are very happy to vote for you, but if you stand as an independent or as a BJP or as a AAP, if you stand for Congress, we're going to vote against you. So there does seem to be across the country, and this is in Bangalore, Karnataka is meant to be the one state where the Congress hopes to do well. So what AAP does is that it takes this anti-Congress wave and it splits it down the middle. So the kind of clean sweep that BJP was hoping to have in these seats now is not likely to happen. Either way, it's fair to say that AAP is going to dent the BJP's prospects in these 150 to 200 seats. AAP will be less effective in least effective in those states where the primary fight is between two parties that are neither Congress or BJP. For example, Tamil Nadu. It's DMK versus ADMK. So it's hard to imagine, or in West Bengal, where it's TMC versus left, it's hard to imagine AAP having much of an impact there. But in straight bipolar Congress-BJP fights, or in multipolar contests, in UP, for example, the contests are likely to be fivefold, pentangular. You'll have the Congress, you'll have BJP, Samajwadi, BSP, and AAP. So anybody who wins 20 to 25% of the popular vote, say in Kanpur, can win a seat. So they would probably put up a reasonable showing in some of the urban, semi-urban centers in Uttar Pradesh. So it's quite clear that they will hurt the BJP's prospects, which is why you can see increasing frustration on the part of BJP towards AAP. And barring any unforeseen circumstance, this situation is likely to be preserved until the election time. Last question. What prospects? What are the limitations of AAP? Now, one of the strengths of AAP is that because it's undefined, because it's amorphous, it allows everybody to see in AAP a little bit of a reflection of themselves. So if you are a Narmada Bachao person, then you say, AAP is a party for me. If you're a shopkeeper that is afraid about Walmart coming, then you look at AAP and you say, yes, this is my party. If you're Meera Sanyal, who's a banker in Bombay, who is upset about the corruption of the Birlas and Tatas, etc., but is otherwise quite happy with the market system, she looks at AAP and says, this is a reflection of me. Captain Gopinath. All these. So you have a very, very diverse bunch of people who, if you were to characterize them in a traditional axis of right and left, you have people ranging from extreme left to extreme right who see in AAP a little bit of themselves. That's the strength of AAP, because it does not pose any ideological barrier for somebody to get associated with the party. But that strength, which has seen record enrollment, record monetary donations, is also one of the biggest limitations or weaknesses of this party. Because you have all kinds of people with all kinds of politics and all kinds of agendas, who are entering this party. Now, at some point, contradictions are going to emerge. You already saw it, although Kejriwal managed to paper over it, episode where Mr. Somnath Bharti went and invaded the homes of some African residents of Khidki village and harassed some Ugandan women. And now there's a court case against him for that. AAP, this episode triggered widespread revulsion amongst supporters of AAP. Many people who saw AAP as something representing something very positive could not understand what the hell is going on. Who is this Bharti character? Why is he doing all this funny stuff? Now, the fact is also that whatever the reservations of Kejriwal, Yogendra Yadav, they all go along with this. Even though they realize that, yes, this is a problem, this is an embarrassment, especially when Mr. Bharti used very, very strong language against other political parties and political leaders. So they can see that this gentleman is a bit of a liability. So in future, it is my belief that some of these contradictions are going to get stronger and stronger. Another example, before I end, on nuclear power. You have some AAP leaders who are saying, now, and all of this will come to the fore very quickly, because in 2014 for the Lok Sabha, in May for the Lok Sabha elections, it's one thing to generate a manifesto for Delhi, where you have to take a stand on a finite number of issues. But when you have to draft a manifesto for the Lok Sabha, you will be called upon to clarify your views on a whole bunch of issues. Now, if you are a BJP or a Congress or a Communist Party with a well-defined or reasonably well-defined ideology, it's not difficult to decide your stand on any issue that comes up. But if you are AAP, which does not represent any particular ideology, how do you take a view on nuclear power? How do you take a view on 377 they took a view where they stood for the rights of Indian citizens or rights of people to love and whoever they want. But there are lots of issues where it will be very difficult for them to reconcile some of the contradictions which exist among their membership.
For example, Kashmir.
Yeah, J&K, although I thought J&K, the way that they handled it, you see, Prashant Bhushan, when he said there should be a referendum on whether the armed forces should be deployed or not. In my view, this is a problematic statement, regardless of whatever view you have, for the simple reason that, and Kejriwal immediately came out and said, this is not acceptable. Now, he could have said like Kumar Vishwas said, that J&K mein koi referendum nahi hoga. He said we cannot have a referendum on security matters. Whether in J&K or Delhi or Gujarat, like the same people who want a referendum, like if you ask Prashant, would you ask the people of Gujarat on March 1st, 2002, the day after Godhra, that should there be army deployment or not? You wouldn't ask such a question. So, Kejriwal, I thought, handled that reasonably well, where he said, no vote on security matters, लेकिन वहाँ के लोगों की राय भी जानना बड़ा ज़रूरी है. So, Kejriwal seems to have the knack for, but it's not an impossible task, because in the main, if they stick to systemic reform and leave some of these more difficult questions for Parliament to decide, for example, it should not be difficult for them to square a difficult circle. But I think this is going to be a principal challenge, that the biggest fear for a large section of Aam Aadmi Party supporters and so on is that this Somnath Bharti type of phenomenon, which of slightly lumpen behavior and irrational. Like for him to say that, even if you look at the drug trade in Delhi, 95% of the drug trade, maybe more, is handled by Indians. It has nothing to do with any Nigerian, even if some Nigerians are involved. It has nothing to do, they're hardly the most important part of any drug racket. So at some stage, Aam Aadmi Party has to start confronting these difficult questions. Whether that then slows down their progress or makes them a less potent force in the 2014 elections remains to be seen. Thank you.